it's 9:15 and we're gonna open the Senate hearing. And first, I want to say thank you very much for coming back since we could not finish last Tuesday. I really appreciate you showing up today again. So let me stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Senator Abbas, you're here today.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to start with House Bill number 319. And the prime sponsor is Representative Ammon.
Good
Welcome.
morning, Chair and members of the committee, esteemed senators. My name, for the record, is Keith Ammon. I live in New Boston. I represent New Boston, Lineborough, and Mount Vernon. So I'm here to introduce House Bill 319. It's a very simple bill, but in short, what it does is it removes a mandate from the state onto school districts that have half-day kindergarten. So there's a busing mandate that requires full trips in the middle of the day. And you can imagine those buses are not very much filled. And they have to travel pretty much the length of the whole district. The origins of this bill, I got together with our school board chair and I asked, because we're always talking about unfunded mandates, and I think that doesn't even apply to school districts. I think the state is allowed to do unfunded mandates to school items. And so this one came up. It's costing our district about $75,000 a year. And it's been a tradition in town, from my understanding, that caregivers and grandparents and parents were able to pick up the students just fine midday. But when this mandate came along, it put an unnecessary burden on the school district. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you so much, and good to see you this morning.
Good to see you,
Representative
Senator.
Hammond. So thank you for bringing this forward. I understand how it might affect your school district, but I can see a number of districts where number of districts and the families that would be impacted by not having transportation available, like parents that are at work and there's not transportation available to move their child, say, back to, the childcare that they're in, or even bring them home or to another family member's house. But just remembering when my daughter was in school, we were lucky that we had a childcare provider that did transportation, but without that, she couldn't have gone to half-day kindergarten. So when things like this come up, I like to try to address them in a way, and I may have missed it, where you make it something where, the school boards have the option to adopt a policy versus making it a statewide mandate. Is that what we've got here?
That was, you stole my thunder as my comeback.
Okay, all right, then I think,
It would leave it up to the local school board,
Okay.
and they're closer to the needs of the parents and the community. So this is something that it's sort of like an unintended a consequence when some districts went to full day kindergarten. It's sort of, this put a mandate that wasn't there prior on districts that have half day. So this is just sort of, separating that. So if you still have half day, the mandate doesn't apply. If you have full day, then it does.
just quick follow-up, Senator
Follow-up.
Warren. Thank you, Representative Anderman. I was trying to be witty about stealing your thunder, but I'm lacking wit because I'm lacking coffee. But here's the thing. So there's one place where it says shall and another place that it says may. So can we be more specific that this is, maybe that's your way of trying to address this, but I think that local school districts should be able to adopt this policy. They may, so I don't know how to exactly address the wording, but I still think the way this is worded makes it an across the state mandate. I
So
wanna
this, the
provide
first,
local- So
the-
just help me see this, because the first part says shall.
yeah, the first part
Talk me
says,
through it.
so if you have full day, then you shall.
Okay.
But if you
I'm-
have half day, implicitly, you don't, the shall doesn't apply to you, right? Because
okay,
it's,
but I think half day is the problem.
well, the half day, the mandate, the shall mandate applying to the half day is the problem. So this would parse that out.
Okay, but I don't want to have a shall not do this on the half-day kindergartens.
It doesn't say shall not, so it still allows for that
Still
option.
may.
Yeah, it just, it turns
may
the,
for
it's a good way to think about it. It turns the shall for half day into a may for half day.
So, thank you. Would you just be open for a further offline discussion if there's a way that we can tweak this so it's clear to the local school districts and their school boards about the application of a policy like this? Or are you,
If you have thoughts on that, yeah, I'm always open to
All right,
making a
good.
great
And-
bill even better.
okay. Thank you, Representative Hammond.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else here who did not sign up yet, who wants to speak on 319? Seeing none, that ends the hearing on House Bill 319. We have until 9:30 for the next bill. Yeah, run out of-
Hmm?
Run out Up the hearing on House Bill 653. The prime sponsor is Representative Petrigno.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Representative Peter Petrino from the town of Milford. I serve on the House Children and Family Law Committee. The legislation before you originated as a result of an interim study, which I chaired this past summer in response to House Bill 1269, which came before the Children and Family Law Committee last session. And the bill called for visual and auditory recordings in each use of restraint and seclusion if it was included in the student's IEP or accommodation plans. Now, a number of parents testified in support of the bill, some sharing disturbing photos of their children with bruise marks, other injuries, and alleging abuse and neglect on the part of school staff. Now, since students with IEPs are mainstreamed, the committee felt that the bill would require security cameras in every classroom throughout the state. And at one point, a committee member suggested that teachers wear body cameras like the police. Well, the majority felt that these measures were impractical and, to say the least, extremely costly. But the testimony given by the parents was heartfelt, and I believe that it would have been inappropriate for us to simply ITL the bill without giving concerns to the parents who testified. So an interim study was formed. And what we discovered was that there are alternative methods from current practices that appear promising in reducing the need for restraint and seclusion. And so we looked at a number of successful approaches, as well as reforms made by the state of Maine in this regard. And their Department of Education acknowledged that current methods are not effective in altering students' behavior, but instead can be traumatizing and cause lasting negative effects. So the result of our work is this legislation, which we are calling the Safe Schools Pilot Project within the Department of Education. Its purpose is exploratory, not for us to implement any one program, but to pilot approved, trauma-informed best practices in schools which wish to participate. And of course, the full bill, the details are in the bill. I would like to lastly thank Senator McHugh for filing the initial legislation last year, and also to the Office of the Child Advocate for their assistance in helping us draft this legislation. And that's it, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Well, thank you. Now I can run upstairs to my committee. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience who would like to speak on this bill, 619?
You got some.
Okay, we have some more, okay. Lisa Masses?
Good morning, Chairwoman Ward and members of the committee. I am Lisa Mascio. I am the Associate Child Advocate for the state of New Hampshire. Cassandra, the Child Advocate, and I were both here last week. The early hearing ran on, so unfortunately she is currently in Florida, actually visiting a number of New Hampshire children that are placed in the state of Florida, so she could not be here today. But I am here. We worked closely with Children and Family Law Committee last session on Senator McHugh's bill. We also attended the interim study committee last fall. This issue of restraints and seclusion is one that the Office of Child Advocate is intimately involved in as part of our statutory mandate. However, our current statute only covers restraints and seclusion of children who are in state care. So while it does include some school restraints and seclusions, it's not all of them. New Hampshire Ed does issue annual statistics about restraints and seclusions, but we do review restraint and seclusion reports from all of the facilities that New Hampshire children are in, including if a child is in state care, could include New Hampshire schools. This last fiscal year, 24, as you'll see from our annual report, which is on our website, we reviewed over 1,500 restraint and seclusion reports for children. And just a couple months ago, we received a call from a very concerned parent whose 5-year-old kindergartner had been restrained 22 times in one day at a school. So this is an issue that we are very concerned about. We believe there is maybe not underreporting, but because there's not a centralized review process, continues to be a concern. To that end, the Office of Child Advocate worked with Waypoint last fall and screened the documentary The Kids We Lose, also in conjunction with Dr. Ross Green from Lives in the Balance, and Ben Jones is here to testify as well, which really delved into the issue of restraints and seclusions in school and the harms that it causes to children. One of the things we really heard about both through the documentary, and we had a special educator on our panel discussion, was that teachers also do not like doing these. It is traumatic for everyone involved, the child, the class, the teacher, but they don't feel like they have an alternative. There is a lot of training out there in New Hampshire. Most school districts have some sort of behavior management training focused on, restraint and seclusion in part. So the purpose of this bill is simply to give schools and teachers another option. It is voluntary, a pilot project. The bulk of the lift would be done by the vendor that is selected in the schools, not necessarily from New Hampshire Ed, but really just to give school districts some alternatives of what other types of trainings are out there, evidence-based trainings that could be behavior management, but get before it escalates to the point of restraint and seclusion, which is really traumatic to everyone involved. So we would urge the committee to vote ought to pass on this pilot project to see what else is out there and allow schools sort of that alternative. Happy to take questions. I did submit some written testimony.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Lissa. Since we, like years ago, we passed a restraint law, 2014-ish area. And I feel like since that time, there's been so much confusion. I hear from teachers in schools that on one hand, their policy is you can't touch kids no matter what, even if they're a danger to themselves or others. And then on the other hand, we're seeing abuse. Do you think that this is going to help sort of find a path that works for everybody with an understanding? Because I don't think there's an understanding. Do you think this is a path toward an understanding for all of the schools?
Well, there has been a lot of amendment since 2014 around 126U, around the notification pieces, definitions. Just a couple sessions ago, there was quite a bit of updates as well as a centralized form. I know New Hampshire Ed has been working very hard on that centralized reporting form. So that's a big piece of it, is just knowledge of what is happening out there. I do think that this pilot project will really give a lot more information, data, and experiential information of what are the alternatives. Because the fear of saying no more restraint and seclusion is that, but we have these very high needs kids in our classrooms and we need a different way to manage that. So I do hope that this pilot project could really give a lot more information, a lot more options, and could potentially result in more statutory change going forward, or even just voluntary changes by the schools by giving them more options for different types of training.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also have to run upstairs to Children and Family Law. Thank you so much, though.
Bonnie? Instead of Bonnie.
Oh, she said she signed up for 7:53.
Okay, what do you think that is?
Yeah, that's funny.
Is that a Bonnie in here?
Yeah.
Okay, please come up to the table. You don't want to testify. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Ben Jones. Okay, have a seat.
Thank you. Ben Jones here.
She's saying she supports,
he
but
just
she doesn't want to
Yeah,
speak.
he does want to speak. Okay, that's fine.
There was, Vice Chair.
You did turn on the microphone, please.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Hello. Good morning. I am Ben Jones with Lives in the Balance, as mentioned by Alyssa Massio. I'm the Director of Policy and Legal Initiatives at Lives in the Balance. We're a small nonprofit based right across the border in Maine, where I drove over from this morning in this nice weather. I'm here to answer any questions you have about the idea of being more proactive versus reactive, but that's really the core of what this pilot project seeks to do, which is address kids' needs up front, solve problems well before we get into a situation of needing to de-escalate, restraint, seclude. So having done this work all across the country, right now we have actively 13 bills in 12 states that we're working on And many of these bills we kind of jump on at a later time, and they're already trying to address the restraint and seclusion in the moment. Get rid of seclusion, more restraint, which are all very good efforts, and we support those. But this is really the forefront of where folks are going. Focus on the training. Like, we don't need to get into the specifics about what the seclusion room looks like, what restraint looks like in this particular situation than another. Those are for maybe another day, but really the place to focus and what we see from all the schools that we work with is they want training. They want to know what to do otherwise. No one wants to do seclusion and restraint, just like Ms. Massio said. And this gives the teachers and support staff those tools to be proactive versus reactive. So I would say this is an effort to be on the forefront of where folks are headed, where the real substance is. I can go into many details about data, cost. So for our organization, we not only do this advocacy that I'm here to do, we also provide training. So we would be a potential vendor of this type of activity. And I can describe more about what that is, but really the core of it is being proactive in problem solving versus reactive in manhandling, to be frank. And most of the kids that we work with and special ed departments that we work with are kids with disabilities. That's where most of the data is. The national data is 80 to 90% of all restraints and seclusions are on kids with disabilities. That's very much the same, I'm sure, for New Hampshire. As Ms. Massio said, the data is not so complete in the New Hampshire state gathering. For example, one just highlight is that seclusions jumped by more than double from one school year to the next, 22 to 23. And there's really no explanation of what the cause for that was or what could be done to address that. So focusing on training seems like a sure thing in terms of supporting kids and educators. And I'll leave it short for you and be available for questions. Thank you.
Do you support this bill?
Yes, yes, I should have said that off the bat.
Okay, question.
Very much.
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. On the first page, lines 9 to 11,
Yes,
it talks about the evidence-based programs, and it mentions the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare.
yes.
Can you just provide some information on that? I think that might be. I was just looking at my computer. There's a lot of different programs within that, but is that something you're familiar with?
Yes, I am. Yep. I think this was likely drawn to be a part of the legislation because that's also referenced in New Hampshire law already as being a standardized place to draw from evidence-based programs. Essentially, that's a third party, a national third party that's certified to provide the label of evidence-based to a program. So it could be reading programs, math programs, behavior management, all of those things. Another big one is What Works Clearinghouse, which is by the Institute for Educational Sciences. But there's a handful of them. And so I think that's an effort to say, we want these to be truly evidence-based and not just evidence adjacent or research-based. Those are less regulated terms. Evidence-based is a very solid thing if you use a third-party reference to search them.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask again, is there anybody else in the audience who wish to speak on House Bill 653? If not, this closes the hearing on House Bill 653. We have 2 minutes before the next one.
Well, we're doing much better than last week on time.
763, yeah.
Well, it says such a. So, I don't know how many instructors there are, is there?
763. And the prime sponsor is Representative Dry.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Representative Margaret Dry. I serve Sullivan County District 7, towns of Plainfield, Cornish, Newport Unity, and Charlestown. I'm also an emergency medical technician, and I am an instructor trainer for the American Heart Association, but I receive no remuneration. That's a volunteer position. So in October of 2006, a guy named Matt Keene from Berlin, New Hampshire, collapsed on the playing fields of Kimball Union Academy, a private high school that's in my town of Plainfield. He was 17, and he was in cardiac arrest. The rescue squad and the ambulance were at least 10 minutes away, and brain cells start to die after 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. Thanks to a readily available AED and trained KUA nurse and athletic trainers trained in CPR, he was revived. In fact, he kind of made it his life's mission now to get AEDs on campuses and athletic fields. I was on the rescue squad that was toned to the call. Representative George Sykes works for the ambulance that responded, and it all happened in Senator Prentice's district. You notice that all three of us are sponsors on this bill because we've seen the results of having this available. The bill from last year went to a committee of conference, just basically talked about AEDs on athletic fields and in schools. The bill picked up this year some of the questions from last year and made it clearer, like who and when does this apply to? It applies to schools that have anywhere from 4th to 12th grade, and it applies to schools when students are participating, not like when an adult club rents the field or things like that. It's just when schools, students are participating on it. It talks about where. We looked at, it said originally readily available on each venue, and we know that venues are spread apart. We wanted to make sure that they were nearby, but not necessarily one on every venue. And so we've changed it from available at to available to. And we've referenced the guidelines of the Heart Association or a similar national organization to talk about where the placement might be, but just that it's accessible to a field, not necessarily a particular field. And then finally, how we're going to do this, we're going to work with the guidelines from that. It gives us flexibility as national guidelines change. We don't have to change a statute every time. But we didn't fund anything when we did these bills, and we're asking schools to get AEDs. And this bill asks for an appropriation, but I want you to look at the fiscal note that came out with this and just tell you that that's a really overly broad fiscal note. And here's some of the reasons why. I'll start at the bottom. It said estimated cost of required AED and CPR training per person per year, $150. Well, CPR training is biannually, so it's going to be every 2 years, not every year, somebody. The cost of a single AED, if you look at the handout I gave you from the state of New Hampshire, it's has a wonderful program that works with the manufacturers of the AEDs, and they are 30, 40, 50, 60% off. And that's for individuals, schools, organizations, anybody. It's a great deal. This had it listed as single AED at $2,500. You'll look at the prices on the back of this, and it's nowhere near $2,500. And finally, it just listed the number of schools and districts without any clarification of what already have AEDs. And also, I'll just draw you to the fact that it says if the school has AEDs, these apply. So if they don't, the rules don't apply. So we're making it easier for them to get AEDs. The training is less than I think that they've said, and I think that there are fewer schools that need AEDs. A lot of them already have them. It doesn't list, and it doesn't specify. So I think that the fiscal note is overly broad, and it could be definitely reduced in a tight budget year, but it would be nice to have some funds for a school to go to. And following speakers will talk a little bit about how they arrived at the numbers for that. And I'm open to any questions.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Chair Ward. Always a pleasure to be working with Margaret Rye. As you heard, she and I have been involved in EMS in the Upper Valley for years and have decades and have co-responded on many calls together. So I was involved in when the Keene family made their initial really donation to the state, set up a commission, set up the guidelines. We got AEDs out to every public school. We also, as you know, and you've talked about, have worked the last few years on emergency action plans for the school sporting events, and then we've refined them to be more specific when it comes to cardiac arrest. With all of that said, and obviously I'm in full support, but what I want to know is if you'd be open to an amendment that we could add in here, that something like has been done with Fish and Game that would allow for gifts, so that if, in order to there could be other families, industries, foundations who want to give, and they could put it, they could give it to, if we set up a fund, they could put it in there. Maybe Fire Standards and Training could manage this fund, so there would just be one place to go.
Thank you, Senator. I think that's a wonderful idea. And if you read this article about Matt Keene, you'll note that it inspired a lot of alums from KUA to give to that fund. Just the fact that this happened there, and they proved that it worked. So I think that you're right. It might really encourage donations and give it a place for them to go. Great idea.
So I'll pull the, if I may, the Fish and Game language, and then let's work on that. It would just be a central place to replenish, and people could feel like the Keene family did, that they could work this through the state. So, okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Any other questions? I have just a clarifying question.
Yes.
I see here that you have, it's the cost for required AED and CPR training per person per year is 150. When you say per person, what persons are you talking about?
Well, in the action plan, they will talk about who they have as their trained personnel on scene, required to be trained. But there are obviously other people that just get it in the course of normal life that will be trained, and that's part of the action plan, the emergency action plan the school does.
So how many people do you estimate?
It depends. I mean, there'd probably be, at least the nurse would have some, the nurse's office would have somebody, and they'd have a list of people. It would probably be enough. I train the trainers in the schools in my area. I train the coaches, and I train the staff. So if any other town is like our town's up that way, they're going to have a lot of people that already have it. So it really depends on what the school says. I would say, half a dozen, because you can't depend on one person to do it, but somebody, a coach or two that would be at the field, that would be on the scene, would be trained. Is probably up to the school, though.
So are you training them as a volunteer, or are you one of the people who is paid for each person?
I train voluntarily for the schools. Yeah.
Okay,
But that's just our area.
okay,
I don't know if it's replicated in other towns.
okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy Vaughn. Welcome.
Good morning, Senator Ward and other members of the Senate Education Committee. I really appreciate being here today. For the record, I am Nancy Vaughn, Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. And I really don't want to repeat everything that Representative Dry just went through. She got a lot of these points covered that I have in my written testimony. And I just wanted to back that up by saying the American Heart Association is in support of these policies being established throughout the country. This is a real policy priority for our organization. We want children, young adults to participate in sports. We just want the environment for them to be safe, particularly if they have an underlying condition that maybe nobody knows about, for that can lead to a cardiac arrest on a sports field. And this is really where, of the 23,000 children under the age of 18 who suffer a cardiac arrest every year, about 40% of those are sports related. And it's because of that stop and start action. Again, usually there's an underlying condition, with the exception of if there's a traumatic blow to the chest in between heartbeats. So there's a lot of different things that can go on. I won't, belabor the point of the fiscal note. This is something that we just wanted to have an opportunity, being a budget year, to add this to the bill, because there are some under-resourced schools. Again, Representative Dry, covered the fact that we're not talking about all schools need AEDs or all schools need additional training in CPR. It's for those schools that have maybe some gaps in their coverage. There are some schools that have sports events that are done on different fields, and they may have different resource needs than other schools where, the fields are on their school property and less AEDs might need to be out there. And again, what really is, those to follow the guidelines. If any organization, a school, a business, a fire department has an automated external defibrillator, they really need to be following the guidelines on the maintenance of that equipment and the use of the equipment and where it is placed, so that it can get to the victim in the quickest amount of time. With that, I wanted to also be here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my questions, and you might not know the answer. How many schools already have AEDs in the state?
I am sorry. I really don't know, but I know Senator Prentice has that. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. You're welcome. So there is a registry that we can have access to through the Department of Safety, but that Matt Keene, that initiative made sure we did an assessment of any schools, now this was a number of years ago, that didn't have them, starting with public schools, and we then bought AEDs for all the public schools that did not already have them, and then what money was left over went to the charter, private, made them available as widely as possible. So at that point in time, and then what has often happened is that at that point in time, everybody had an AED. So once you get it, you pretty much keep, it's not required that you keep it up, but they have been keeping them up. So the Department of Safety will be the final word on this, but it is my understanding that every school has an AED. But it is, sorry, go ahead.
How long do they last? How often do they have to be replaced?
The only things that have to really be replaced are the pads. The pads have an expiration date. These machines.
Batteries, maybe.
Yeah, and it's incredible how long they can actually, how long they can sit in thankfully sit in a box. But that's why it talks, both the emergency action plan and this talk about checking the machines to make sure that their pads are there, that they're within date, that it still turns on and turns off. So it puts those requirements in place.
Excellent.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator
you.
Prentice.
Oh, you're welcome. No, it was a.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Emily Knight.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm here to testify for this bill. I have done this before many times, and you look very familiar to me. I work as a nurse over in the Seacoast at Wentworth Douglas Hospital, and I've been heavily involved with American Heart Association, our state's committee for sudden youth death, and Who We Play For, which is a company that screens children for cardiac arrest throughout the nation. And I've been doing most of that for the past 15 years. So I have some answers to some of those questions that you've been asking. I'm also heavily involved with the state's program for AED placement and those types of programs that we have out there. I really, I've never understood. We go into these schools and we have fire drills and we have active shooter drills, and the kids are not dying at the rate that they're dying of sudden cardiac arrest. It makes no sense. It's the number one reason why a child dies on a school campus across the nation is sudden cardiac arrest. There is a large amount in our state. We've recently started screening. We've screened about 700 kids in the last 4 months, and we found 6 kids at risk out of 700. So that's a large, large number. It's a larger number than we thought we had. These kids need protection, and the only protection we can give them is to make sure staff is CPR trained, to make sure there's an AED, and to have a cardiac emergency response plan in place in these schools. As most of you know, the Federal Hearts Act was signed into law in December on Capitol Hill. We did go down and testify for that as well. And as Nancy said, those 23,000 kids are the ones that are going to be kept safe by this act and these laws that you guys will be putting in place here. We have to do better. It's not something that we should be losing a child over in this day and age. Every minute without an AED decreases their chance of life by 10%. So those AEDs need to be there. People need to be trained, and we have to have these plans in place for that. Can I answer questions for any of you? Yes.
Chair Ward?
Senator Prentice.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking my question. We talked a lot about the children and the athletes, but would it be fair to say that
Absolutely.
anybody, an adult, a mom, a dad, a grandpa, a
Yes.
grandma, like anybody that happens to be at that event could benefit, have a life-saving benefit from
Absolutely.
this, from them having a plan, knowing how to implement that plan, and having the AED readily available.
Yes, and it's not just athletes. It's definitely not athletes. It's the child that's at gym class. It's the tuba player on the field that's, out in the marching band. It is the whole school as an entirety. The staff, the students, every person that's involved in a game on a bleacher. It is just our responsibility to keep those people safe at the same level that a grocery store does that has an AED in place.
Any other questions? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So I think every parent in the room is probably scared to death right now because those statistics are kind of,
They are large, yes.
And children go for annual visits, checkups. You have to have a checkup for sports. What is the criteria of your screening the parent should be asking for or about that they're not catching at regular pediatrician
Yeah, so
visits?
I'm not necessarily here to talk about my screening, but I'm always happy to. So I will tell you this, if a child goes for a normal health visit prior to playing sports, they will probably catch 4% of the cardiac arrhythmias or anatomical problems that are present. It's like putting your stethoscope to a wall and listening for electricity. You can't do it. The only way to catch those kids is to get an EKG. So if you can think about that, these are catching 94% of those kids. So if you're now looking at those differences, we don't ask for EKGs in sports. We can't tolerate that amount of volume or cost at the primary school level. D1 athletes get checked for EKGs, but not the kid in Concord that's playing 4 sports a season, So in those cases, because we can't screen, we need to be prepared. And this is what this bill does. It saves those kids. It saves all of those kids that are at risk.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom Praisel supports but doesn't want to speak. Anybody else in the audience who would like to comment on House Bill 763? Seeing none. Ends the hearing on House Bill 763. And we are opening the hearing on 7:53.
Yeah. I don't have
And the prime sponsor is
I'm going to be introducing it for the prime sponsor. It's Nancy
Codell.
Murphy. Unless Representative Cordelli, are you edging out of your chair to handle this?
Well, I signed up to testify.
I'll just open it and we will do it together. Great. And Representative Murphy gave us a great handout with copies of that. When you're explaining. Good morning, Sue Prentice, for the record, State Senator District 5. I'm just introducing 753 on behalf of Representative Murphy. This has to do with implementing or defining an expedited due process, and that must not exceed the timeline applicable for the regular due process hearing for actions to enforce special education rights. I think we can all understand why this is important. It appears from what I've received from Representative Murray in talking about this over the last few months, that just the regular period for due process is being exceeded when it's an expedited case. So we have to tighten this. So Representative Murphy, I keep calling her Murray, put together an excellent handout. I'm having that copied for you so everybody can have that, which breaks down the bill. And with that, I'll close my introduction and look forward to other speakers from the House or from the special education community to further detail the need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bonnie Dunham? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Bonnie Dunham, and I'm not positive, but Representative Murphy may not be here because it's election day in the town where she resides today. Merrimack is always does it on its own timeline, apparently. So my name is Bonnie Dunham, and I'm asking you to support this bill. And it really is to ensure that an expedited due process hearing can't take longer than a regular one. A regular due process hearing is for any dispute a parent in school may have in the special education process, and it must be completed within 45 calendar days, and the report and the result sent to both parties. That would be extended by up to 30 days if a parent files for it, because they have to have a resolution session, which can be waived with the agreement of the parent and the school district, or they could agree to use mediation instead of the resolution session. So 45 calendar days. An expedited due process hearing is only related to discipline issues, and that would be if a parent disagrees with the school's decision to remove the child, they believe that it is a result of the disability, the behavior, or the school district believes that keeping a child in a placement would substantially likely to result in harm to that child or others, and so they're asking a hearing officer to remove the child. So an expedited due process hearing must be completed within 20 school days, and the results sent within 10 school days to the parties. And there is an option in there for a resolution session also, but it can be waived and it's shorter. So I looked at the Manchester, New Hampshire school calendar for last year and this year as an example, and found that if a request for a regular due process hearing was filed on June 3rd of last year, the hearing would be completed and a decision given by July 18th if there was no resolution session, and at the maximum if the full resolution session was used by August 16th. 10 and a half weeks after the request was filed, but still in time to be settled before the school year. But an expedited due process hearing wouldn't be done and the decision given until October 2nd if there was no resolution session, and October 17th if the full resolution session was used. 19 and a half weeks after the request was filed, well into the next school year, which means that that hearing would take between 9 and 11 weeks longer than a regular due process hearing. Now, you might ask, I did, why wouldn't they just use a regular due process hearing then? And it's because the federal law in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires for disciplinary issues that they use an expedited hearing. And when they put that into place, they did it with the intent that it would speed up the process. And in fact, there's a letter that the Office of Special Education Programs wrote that clarifies that the purpose of expediting the due process hearing related to a disciplinary decision is to ensure that the matter is resolved promptly and the child's educational program is not adversely affected by undue delays. So at certain times of the year, and it's only if it's towards the end of the school year, that expedited due process hearing could essentially impede that child's education for the end of one school year, the entire summer if they receive extended school year services, and the beginning of the next school year. That's just not right. And this would be compliant with IDEA because for an expedited due process hearing that happened at the end of the school year, so it goes into the next year, the 20 school days, the 45 calendar days is within 20 school days. And so it's not contrary to what the federal law says at all. It just seems fair, reasonable. It's just common sense, really. And so I hope that you would recommend it ought to pass. Thank you. And I've given you a handout that has a lot of footnotes and citations for you.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Representative Cordelli.
Good morning, Senate members and Chair. For the record, Glenn Cordelli, representing Tufton Borough, Wolfboro, and Ospey in the beautiful Lakes region. And just wanted to briefly touch on House Bill 753. It passed on our consent calendar. It is, I think, our committee thought it as a simple bill. You heard some testimony already. And I have with me the federal statute. And I'm sorry, but I left copies at home, so I'll give them to you to look at. But I wanted to point out it does talk about expedited hearings, but also I wanted to point out it states that a state may establish different state-imposed procedural rules for expedited due hearings conducted under this section than it has established for other due process hearings. So they say, we can alter timeframes, and I think this bill simply says that expedited means expedited. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak on House Bill 753? Seeing none, this concludes the hearing on the House bills, and it concludes the hearing, the Senate Education Committee. The committee will take a 2-minute recess and then we'll get into executive session.
Got it.
It's handed in a little late. It's 7:60.
Thank you.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. I'd like to start with House Bill 752 because Caitlin Davis from the Department of Education wanted to add something to it or clarify something before we go ahead.
Good morning. For the record, Caitlin Davis from the Department of Education. I'm here to speak on House Bill 752 today, which is relative to charter school closures. This bill clarifies procedures around charter school closures, and the department is otherwise supportive of their bill, except the department would like some additional language added relative to the furnishing of transcripts for schools that have closed. So the department, just a little history on this bill, there were two bills in the House, and so I apologize that we were not here last week when the bill was originally heard. We thought the bills had both been ITL'd in the House, but there were two bills that did similar things, House Bill 740 and House Bill 752. 752 was passed by the House, and 742, which did similar work, was ITL'd. So that's why we missed the original hearing. So for the department, so 742 did not have a fiscal note on it, but 740 did have a fiscal note. So I just wanted to provide that information to the committee relative to the fiscal note. So it's specifically relative to the process of the department maintaining student transcripts and furnishing those transcripts going forward to future transcript requests. So when a school closes, this bill would require the transcripts to be remitted, or all of the student records associated with the students to be remitted to the Department of Education. We do feel this is the best practice and would be most beneficial to New Hampshire students attending a charter school that closed. We have found that some charter schools have closed, and the status of the records of those students that have attended in the past has been challenging for those students to track down, and those students very regularly reach out to the department looking for those records. So we agree that the department maintaining those records on an ongoing basis is the best practice, and we actually do this for other types of schools right now. So if a career school or a higher education institution were to close in this state, the records are provided to the Department of Education, and the Department of Education does have a staff member that is their full-time job is to provide closed school transcripts to those who request their transcripts. That position is a fee-funded position, so individuals, when they request a copy of a transcript, and remember, they may be requesting multiple copies of a transcript at a time. They're looking for employment oftentimes. These are usually adults several years after, or many, many years after their graduation, looking for a copy of their records. So those individuals pay a fee to the department. The department then will provide an official copy of their transcripts. That usually entails a work by the individual. It includes using a specialized transcript paper and usually mailing costs associated with these transcripts. So that's the purpose of the department's fee. It's really to just pay for the process of us maintaining those records and then providing them when asked. So right now, the department would like similar language added to 752 to allow the Department of Education to be able to charge a fee for these types of records too. So meaning when a school were to come close, they would remit all of their transcripts and student records to the Department of Education, and then an individual later on in life, when they were looking for their records for whatever reasons, employment, enrolling in a different higher education institution, whatnot, would come to the department. The department would be able to give them an official copy of their transcripts, and they would be able to use that for their needs. Just a little bit more information. So right now, the department currently charges $25 per transcript for closed schools. Those are the career schools and the colleges and universities I mentioned before. Relative to New Hampshire charter schools, we currently have 42 charter schools that have been approved in the state of New Hampshire since the inception of charter school laws. 9 of those schools have closed. During that time, the total enrollment of those 9 schools closed was approximately 2,300 students. Now, that is not necessarily unique individuals. Those were the enrollments of the years of those students. And so those would be the populations of students that we would be potentially furnishing records on. There is one of the things that the House did ask was if there was a way for us to go back and get records for the schools that have closed for those students. And unfortunately, if a school did not remit those records to the department, we are unable to go back and get them. And we can certainly reach out, but it's unlikely that the school continues to have that information years after the school has long been closed. So the department, just kind of to reiterate the point that the department is asking for is we're just asking for the ability and authority to charge a fee, which we would likely establish the fee schedule in rule or law, but we don't feel that we have the authority to charge a fee unless it's specifically established in law first.
Did one of you take some notes? Good. There's a lot of extra information, I think. So what I like to do is to hold off on executing this particular bill today until all of us can absorb what you just told us.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to send you some language specifically for what the amendment could look like.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for taking my testimony.
HB 76. I'm looking for what to pass on this one. That the bill requires the Department of Education to establish and maintain a tracking system for all state complaints related to special education services.
I'd like to make a motion of ought to pass.
I have a motion of ought to pass on 76 FN. Is that a second?
I'll second it.
Second. Discussion. Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did hear testimony that if in smaller districts, a special ed complaint is being made, that is identifiable in and of itself, particularly in the smaller rural districts. So, and families don't want their personal information discussed. They want to just follow through with a special ed complaint without it becoming a source of conversation within their community. So I think that this bill has a good intention, but it's not written to protect families in rural districts. So for that reason, I won't be supporting.
Well, in the hearing report, Ms. Fenton explained that the DOE already tracks complaints internally through a spreadsheet, and that what this bill will actually will codify what they are doing right now. So I would think that this bill would be a positive step in codifying something that's already happening. Any further discussion? Senator Prentice? Senator Altshuler, for your second question?
It was not a question, just a comment that during the testimony, we also, in the bill on line 28, Part E, the name of the school district, the DOE did say that while they do some tracking, larger districts are named, but the smaller districts could be led to identify students or families. So they identified this as an issue during their testimony. And that it could be, and I have notes right here, a privacy problem
Is that
for
in the hearing
parents.
report or in the bill?
I have notes from the hearing itself,
hearing,
right on
okay.
my bill, my
Okay.
copy of the bill. Senator Ward.
Senator Prentice?
If I may, so just to, I'm a co-sponsor of this because I have I've had a number of families that approach me about their, about special education services and the complaints and the things not moving in a timely manner, like almost an entire school year goes by before an issue is taken care of. And it's not just one time, it's multiple times, but I am sensitive to the public health information, well, we call PHI protected, and it's considered PHI here, especially if there's any billing that's done with it. So so my question is, well, I want to track it so that we can, we can formally codify what's happening. But is there any language maybe that Senator Altshuler could offer, or that I could offer with her, that would put a layer of protection over this? Because in the smaller school districts, and this goes with, I'm just going to squirrel over to medicine for a second. If there's less than 5 incidents per zip code, we don't report that data because it could be identified in a small town, or people would know potentially who that was. So is there a layer that we can put over this to make this work, protect the names of the families, but move the tracking forward, would be my question.
Yeah. You want to put in an amendment? And,
Would you do that with me?
Sure.
Okay, so Senator Altshuler and I will do
Okay.
that together and bring it back to the next exec session. I
Okay,
have lots of yellow sticky notes for Nick today.
I'll have to withdraw my motion then, about to pass.
Madam Chair, if I may make just one comment, if there is gonna be an amendment on line 12 and line 25, it says a summary of the allegations. I think the department summarizing the complaint, I think there was some testimony that might have been very burdensome for them to have to do that every time. I thought we would entertain maybe saying the subject matter as opposed to a summary, but that's not gonna sway me either way, but I think that might, if we're in the spirit of amending anything, maybe we.
I have
Do it
that.
all at
I have
once.
that note too from the testimony. So yeah.
we'll include that for the next meeting.
Instead of word, if I could just point to the back of the room,
Talk-
Diana Fenton, we don't have to talk about this now, but maybe you can connect with us, Senator Altshuler and I. You've heard the concerns, so we can get the right language in there. All right.
Okay. HB 184. Establish a committee to study the changing the time the school starts. That was Representative Wheeler's bill. It went through the House. So do I have a motion on this one?
I would motion ITO on this.
Do what?
I would motion ITO.
Second.
We have ITL.
And if I may, just for the record, I appreciate the representative's efforts, but since I've been here, this is the 4th or 5th time that this has come forward. It's not that study is there to, like, when things come forward multiple times, to clarify, but I'm not sure it's going to get us anywhere, and it's going to create another study committee that maybe we can just wait on right now. But I appreciate him bringing this forward on behalf of the students who contacted him.
So I have a motion and a second to ITL.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's 5-0. Put it on consent.
Yes.
Yes, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And who wants to take it out?
Take it out.
The other one will take it out. One 193, do we have it? No, we don't have a hearing report on 193. Oh, yes, we do. Yep. House Bill 193, having to do with the maximum number of credits per course eligible for the dual and concurrent enrollment program. And again, that's this is something that's happening already, and it's well established. So do we have a motion on the bill?
A motion to pass?
To pass, and I have a second?
A second.
Second. Discussion.
I think when this was brought up, it was the type of courses.
Yeah, we discussed that, and it's pretty well established what kinds of courses they can take and how many for a certain period, so.
And in my notes, it was, a lot of those would have been some, like, courses that first responders take, so I just didn't know if
But,
we
you
wanted.
know, specialty courses are not in it, but academic core courses are. So you ready to vote on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So,
Consent? Motion for consent?
to pass. Consent? Consent?
Aye.
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 All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I can take that one out. The next one is House Bill 222. Senator Prentice.
I make a motion not to pass. And I'm happy to speak to my
Do we
motion.
have a
if I get
second? Second, okay, discussion. Senator Prentice, you want to speak to it?
Thank you very much, Chair Ward. So this is a bipartisan effort, and not just the hearing notes, but the testimony in support of this talks about, well, first of all, the services are already happening and remain unchanged. That we are finding, even for the limited number of these, that getting these MOUs completed have been the problem and are seen as unnecessary by the sponsors. And I want to just read from the testimony of Representative, we have Balboni and Representative Maureen Mooney, saying that it serves no separate purpose to the required relationship between public and charter schools in the sending district. The MOU is just an additional substantial layer of duplicative work in a fast-paced, resourceful school environment that will unnecessarily cost administrators, teachers, and parents time and expense. So I remember when we first talked about putting these in place, I have no problem, basically moving away from this, because the services are there's no question about the services. It's just a layer. It's considered an unnecessary layer that is becoming an administrative hookup for the school districts, and that's the only reason I'd be interested in moving away.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will not be supporting this bill. I did receive emails from parents who were really concerned about this. We heard testimony from the Department of Education that said without this, they really don't have any course of action if things are falling through the cracks. I think we need more attention to special education and more opportunity for parents to have some control over it and not less. So I will not be supporting the ought to pass on this.
So I have an OTP with a second, and all those in favor? Senator Evans.
Just one comment though, and this came up from a law that's recently been in place, and it's only been done twice. I mean, it passed in 2022, and it's kind of a new procedure. So I mean, maybe it should be repealed one day, but we maybe cutting it too soon, because I feel like the first time they had to do it is probably the hardest time they had to do it. I'm not sure if second year was any easier than the first. Hopefully it was. I'm just something to think about.
And Rebecca Fredette from the department said that she's willing to work on the MOU to make it a little bit easier. But I think getting rid of it now is just, it's premature, and at least parents and the we heard from the department, they need this. They want to hold on to this.
But if you have the people in the schools who are dealing with these MOUs and are saying that the kids are getting the same services, they don't need the MOUs, that just adds an extra layer of work. What do you say to that?
So what the MOU requires, it's a very small chart, and it's very easy to get that information if they're doing it properly, but it gives the department some conversation with the parents that complain that their needs aren't being met. They can look at the MOU and say, oh, you know what, they did not come to an agreement here. You're right, this child is not getting the services. And they testified that that's the only guardrail they have for parents, is to be able to look at this. They don't have any other way to check what's happening in this on the school level.
Okay, I'll play the devil's advocate. So what do you say to the people who say with or without an MOU, the child still gets the services that it needs?
But we heard testimony that they weren't. And
There
this
was one
right.
person who said that one.
I received emails from parents that were, I don't know if anybody else did, but that they were very concerned that this was going to go away, that they wanted to hold on to.
So do you feel that more information is needed to have? Senator Prentice? Senator Prentice?
Yes, I'm just trying to frame my words.
Okay.
Because and in no way am I looking to limit parental involvement, and it's all still completely there. And I know Senator Alschiller has her hand up, but I am thinking that maybe a more appropriate motion is re-refer, which gives us more time to work on this. Because I mean, it's my understanding again that the services are being they're happening, and the IEP and the 504 in itself brings the conversation between the parents and the schools. And I know this has to do with the charter schools. Those conversations are still happening. If they're not, I don't feel that we heard anything that says that the MOU is really making that happen. With or without it, there's still, those conversations may still be problematic. So I'm just wondering if people would be open to me pulling my motion back and going for a re-refer to give us some more time might be the best choice,
Okay.
rather than ITL.
I would
Yeah,
support the re-refer.
Senator Altshuler, you didn't want to say something?
And I saw Senator Abbott had his hand up too.
Yeah,
What the hell?
I would support a re-refer because we actually, just to level set, Ms. Fredette did not speak in support of this legislation. She was neutral. And she also told us that the DOE will only be checking these every 6 years. So every time one comes in, it's not going to be looked at for another 6 years, which is half of a student's educational years. So there, this is, it was a well-intended piece of legislation that was supposed to create a guardrail and actually didn't do what everyone thought it might do, and has instead ended up costing schools money in chasing down these MOUs, and the Department of Education also chasing them down. They still have 56 outstanding as of today. And additionally, the Department of Education doesn't oversee special education in charter schools. They have no jurisdiction there. Only the district, the sending district, is able to do that work with the charter school overseeing the IEP, which is federally protected. This MOU is it's just more paperwork. We heard that we heard from the superintendent in Chichester that the MOU has nothing to do with the actual implementation of services, and it's not required by state education rules. So it's just this extra little string that's flying around that causes people to do more paperwork.
Senator Abbas?
I would say that I would support a re-refer because I think that would give us also one more summer where they have to do this. They're probably gonna be mad at me during the summertime, but I will say I do think there's the use of the MOU. It's not binding, so there are some concerns with it. But I was really concerned with the inefficiency or how long it was taking them to put these together, and weighing that against what's their probative value. In, I guess, in some cases, I think, as my colleague to my right saying, they have some value, but in many cases they don't, and they're not being looked at. So I think maybe one more summer, I'll be more confident going Octopass or ITL either way. But I think a re-refer is what I would love to support.
So
Senator Sullivan?
So I support the re-refer, but I just want to make it clear that Ms. Fredette did say that if the MOU did not exist, there would be no oversight in the charter schools because the DOA does not oversee special education. And that they would have no recourse for parents because they don't know. And the 56 that weren't returned are the agreements were not, there wasn't an agreement met. You've got 56 students that don't have their IEPs or special education being met because they didn't come to an understanding. So, you know, that's a concern. And the department wouldn't have any recourse without knowing that information.
Senator Oshila? No, okay.
That's not
I
how
heard that-
IEPs work, but
I heard that the MOUs, whatever, that is still carried out, the children are still getting, even if the MOUs are not signed. Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Senator Ward. And I think based on all of the discussion that this is one of those bills, even with the well-intentioned, it still needs a little more time. And I think that's something we can all agree so we can vet these concerns. And maybe, you know, since to Senator Abbas's point, because I remember when this was introduced a few years ago, it also may not have had enough time to really, so within another year to work this bill where it came out in a bipartisan way. Let's get these sponsors together and let's get these questions in front of them and the department and work it out.
Okay.
That's
so
my 10 cents. Thank you.
You're,
I'm all for, I'm gonna make, so first of all, I have to withdraw my motion, which means that Senator Alschuler has to join me in withdrawing if
I withdraw.
Right, now I will make a motion to re-refer.
we have a second for re-refer?
Okay. To refer.
All those in favor of re-refer?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
You'll put this on consent?
Oh, move to consent.
Second.
It's a motion to consent, not, to consent. Motion to consent?
Motion to consent.
Okay,
Who wants to take it out?
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Prentice? House Bill 231, prohibiting school district personnel from transporting students to medical and mental health appointments. Senator Prentice?
Senator Ward, Chair Ward, so I'm gonna move it expedient to legislate. And if I get a second, I'd be happy to say exactly why.
Second.
So you want
Chair
to
Ward.
write the ITL on this one? Okay. Why do you want to ITL it? What's your reason for it?
So, and this actually may be another that, so the thing that worries me about this is that although there was testimony about the having appropriate, consent for transporting of students by a non-parent for a minor medical emergency, there was also this language about health or medical protocol or policy, which these already exist. And in questioning the prime sponsor, we were vacillating between the two of these. This might be another re-refer situation, because I can understand why you would want to have, a parent either do the transporting or consenting for someone else to transport. But publishing it in an emergency of health or medical emergency health or medical protocol or policy, the emergency health is already taken care of and the emergency medical is already taken care of. So I just left that particular hearing not exactly sure, outside of the consent for the minor transportation, how this fit into the larger responses on the campus. That's all. So maybe re-refer would have been a better option for me. I've got to start pulling back my ITLs and thinking about it twice. Thank you, sorry.
I read into it, there was a way of protecting school personnel because they're not really licensed to take children to appointments or to visits. And that will protect them because they're doing something that is not in their contract. And this was a way of saying, if you're going to have that, you have to have a policy and then you have to have parental consent to taking them to a medical appointment or to a visit someplace.
So agreed, and I see other hands up. I just want to point out that it's the home for this. I feel like if there's going to be a policy like this, it's free. I don't see where it belongs in emergency health. If, as described by the sponsor, it was a minor, not just a minor in terms of age, but it was a medical appointment that was non-emergent. I don't know why it would be in an emergency or emergency or medical protocol. I think it is just like a consent form to go on a school outing. That would be, to me, that's a more appropriate place. All right, that's all I'm going to say. Sorry.
Okay.
Why am I sorry? I wish I had so thank you, Senator Ward and committee, for hearing my comments.
I oppose an ITL, and I would support not to pass. I can't think of absent an emergency, any practical scenario where it's appropriate, where the school would be driving or transporting kids to medical appointments without the parents' knowledge and approval. I can't think of any scenario where that's appropriate. I mean, I don't think that's the role of the school to do that, especially with,
Teachers or teaching personnel.
yes.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this bill is looking for a problem that doesn't exist. It's, projecting something that's not happening. Like it's unnecessary. It is not happening. It hasn't happened. It's, why would we do this? Why can't the school districts do their own policies, which they do? Because we have 0 times that this has happened. So why are we doing this?
So in the bullet point here, this bill is for non-emergency policy where the school cannot permit transport without parental permission, no matter who would be transporting. Senator Prentice.
Thank you. And again, this might be the home for the language or not at all. But a child, a minor, like whether it's a medical appointment or going to a competition or, some other, they're leaving school property. A parent would have to consent to that. And even thinking back, and it's been a while since my daughter was in school, she could not be consented to go anywhere without me being very specific about who that was with. And I know we're talking about school staff here, and I understand your concern about the school staff having the protection, but, I wonder exactly what we're getting at, what the right home for this is. I believe these policies already exist. And it did, and again, not to muddy the water here, but there was some back and forth about, school emergencies and how those got handled in Massachusetts. It's even in here, and how they're not in New Hampshire, where I believe they are, even though this is not about emergencies. That just came up, and I felt like it muddied the water for me. I was like, so my daughter could not leave the campus unless she had my consent and exactly who, and before I was, on a personal note, before I was married to my husband, who was not my daughter's father, this is my second marriage, she couldn't even, because he had a different last name, She couldn't leave without me being very specific about that. So that's how the school district I live in handled it. Now that I'm like thinking back on it, so I had to be really directive. So maybe it's not ATL, maybe it's re-referred. If folks want to go a different way, that's fine. I think my reservation, I agree with consent. I just think it's already exists. And if we're not talking about emergencies, then let's find the right home for this.
Okay,
I'm done. Thank you.
a motion for the bill?
Busy day, yeah.
I'm sorry, did you withdraw?
You voted ITL, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could,
You-
I'll leave the ITL. Let's take a vote and then we
Okay,
can,
let's-
because that would be, because again, I believe that this already exists.
Okay,
I'd like to go that way.
Who is for ITL? That's 2. And who wants it to pass?
What was the idea?
I oppose the ITL.
Okay, so to pass is 3-2.
We actually have to have a motion for ought to pass for that to go. So I'll make the motion of ought to pass.
Second.
You second it. And all those in favor of the 3?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's 3-2. Who wants to take it out? Abbas, you take it out?
I can take it out.
Okay. Abbas will take that one out. Maybe one more before you have to take off Senator Altshuler?
Yeah, I'm giving myself 2 minutes because I'm only going upstairs. So
Okay.
5 of.
I think we need to hear more.
440 on educator licensing. Is that an easy one? Or you want to skip to something?
I can, I'll make an ought to pass motion on 440.
Up to pass on 440?
Where is my 445?
It requires the department to adopt rules requiring candidates for initial administrator, teacher, instructional specialist, or educational specialist license to obtain passing scores on prescribed professional assessments.
A second.
What is the motion?
No, I think it was not to pass.
Yeah.
Ought to pass?
And
And a second.
Senator Evans, okay. And if I can speak to my motion, there was some conversation in the meeting and after about the word license, and I checked with the department, and they had actually changed everything to license a couple of years ago, so they're fine with the word license being in there. And there was conversation also about the charter schools and so charter schools teachers, a certain percentage have to be licensed. However, it's an or have 3 years teaching experience. So
Yeah, they
we're
have to have
bringing it
50%
yeah,
or
or
licensed.
the,
licensed,
or those
what-
teachers can have 3 years teaching experience. Right. So it doesn't apply to them.
Well, I know, but it seems to me reasonable that if you're going to have a job, that you should pass the test that qualifies you for the job. Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So while the Department of Education may have purportedly said they're okay with the language, we don't have an educational specialist license in New Hampshire. So perhaps that needs to either be withdrawn or the educational specialists need to come up with a board and, get licensed, because that is not something that exists. And secondarily, I will not be supporting this because once again, this is a mandate for public schools and not charter schools, not private schools. And we just talked about a bill that's going to apply to every school in the state. And this one, not so much. So if we're not going to be consistent about what our policies are going to cover, the singling out of public schools for extra work and certifications, while the charter schools have none that apply, particularly in this instance, and we don't want to even look at the private schools, I will not support this.
So you don't think the public schools includes public charter schools?
It doesn't say that.
No, but public charter schools are part of the public schools.
we have delineated that in other legislation to make sure that it is clear that it includes public charter schools. So if that is the intent, we should amend this to put in public charter schools.
Okay, I will amend it. Committee amendment.
Senator Ward, so the outline for the criteria to teach in a charter school is already in law in a different section. It can't apply to charter schools because they don't have the same criteria for their teachers. That's why they're innovative. That's why they have certain carve-outs around certain legislation. They're not traditional public schools and they don't have the same criteria for their teachers. That would
No,
change
but
it so that
most
all
of
of
the
them would have to
teachers
have
that
it.
teach in charter schools have been public school teachers.
Not all.
Not necessarily.
I think so.
No.
Well,
Nope.
okay.
Some
I-
don't have to have any
I stand
teaching
corrected.
credentials at
All
all.
right. Okay. So I have an ought to pass. Yes, Senator Prentice.
So, thank you, Senator Ward, and with your hearing, with what you're offering of, say, a friendly amendment, and then also understanding, and having had the opportunity to talk to Senator Sullivan about this, is it possible to still include that language, but put as, in accordance with the law, which, so it covers the ones that do have to have this, and the ones that don't, because it's, already established in statute, so it makes it cuts it that way. It covers who has to, and it says those that don't, as it sits in statute right now, I think it's Sarah Sullivan, 194-B, I think 14, maybe. Would that be a way to cover both here?
I don't know, but I think that if this goes to public schools, we can easily put in one bill next year for charter schools or for any other. My personal feeling is that if you're going to teach any subject, you should pass an exam in the subject that you're going to be teaching. It seems to me that whether you're in charter school, private school, public school, you want qualified people. You want people who are passing their professional exams. And this bill just happens to start out with the public schools. So
your, Senator Ward, so your position is that this should cover not just the public schools, but the charter schools as well, because they are teaching New Hampshire children.
I'd like to do that, but then Senator Sullivan said that they have a different chapter, and I'm not sure about that, but I think we can get something going and then correct it later on or add something later on.
Or can we hold on execing this, and I see Senator Sullivan's working her computer.
I am, but Grant has a
Please.
feverishly typing.
I know,
Grant Bossy,
He scribbled a note to me, I was trying to figure it out.
Grant Bossy, Deputy Chief of Staff with the New Hampshire Senate. As I understand it, House Bill 440 adds an additional exam component to the educator credentialing or licensing process. So this would apply to charter school teachers who are credentialed. Not all charter school teachers are credentialed. So the ones that go through the traditional credentialing path would be covered by this in order to get their ticket, as we used to call it when I worked at the Department of Education. The ones that are hired outside of the Department of Education credentialing would not be affected by this, and you would need a separate statute to do that.
So are you saying that we can add public schools and public charter schools?
You're the legislature. You can do anything you want. Whether that's a good idea or not is up to you.
So in accordance with the law as it is.
That would take a separate outside of the credentialing process. You would have to add a separate, under whatever chapter it is, OLS could help you with that. You would have to have a separate provision saying that these teachers that are allowed to work in charter schools without an education credential would also have to do the separate requirement for a proficiency test as covered by this. It would have to be a separate, again, you could do it as an amendment, but it would be a separate part of the law that you'd be amending.
Okay,
I'd be happy to bring an amendment forward if we want to hold on this,
well, we can pass it and bring it in for them.
or bring a floor amendment in. Okay.
Senator Prentice, can I just, so in the actual bill,
Thank you, Brent.
because it says, it does say public schools, charter schools, and private schools, and it talks to the credentialing. I'm just backing on what Grant said. I think it's covered without having to say charter schools, which muddies the water because some of the teachers do not need to be credentialed. So do you know what I'm saying?
I think what, may I, Chair Ward?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Senator Sullivan, I do hear what you're saying, and I think for what becomes muddy is when language is not like specific, like cover, says exactly who it covers, and so, I know you're very familiar with this because you have really targeted expertise in this area, but at first pass, I think from a layperson perspective, it's worth the value of applying it to public and to charter schools. And that if it's a separate amendment, the charter schools as in accordance with the current law. So who it has to, it meets up to that threshold that we talked about previously and that the Deputy Chief of Staff just laid out. I mean, that's what I'd like to see for, like fairness, lay person language right across the board. What do they call it? Prudent?
Do you want to do that for next Tuesday?
I'd love to. Add it to my sticky note. Poor Nick, a yellow sticky note. And, people can, look, we can have a difference, and if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I appreciate the opportunity to try.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, you withdraw the motion of what to pass?
Withdrawn?
We don't have a motion on what to pass. We're going to pass.
I think we started talking.
Senator Prentice, we're going to work on an amendment.
Correct.
Now, do you want to have that
Do we have a motion?
for next?
Do we have a motion?
Okay, so I'll withdraw my motion. You can't withdraw my motion.
What? I think I was.
And then we'll just hold off until next Tuesday, at which time Senator.
I appreciate the opportunity to bring forward, thank you both for agreeing to withdraw. I appreciate the opportunity to bring forward amendment, and we'll just take it up there.
Thank you.
It seems to me that regardless where you are teaching, you should be qualified. You should be able to pass the exam that you have to pass the EMT exam, right?
Yeah, and you have to be licensed, and it applies whether you're teaching it at a hospital or you're teaching it in a career technical education center. EMT instructors or EMS instructor coordinators are all licensed the same
Right,
way.
okay.
So
This is the second time we'll take off the OTP.
it says we just need a little refining, and let's see. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't
Tweaking,
work. But
tweaking.
I'd like to give it a try.
Okay.
So make a motion to come out of exec session.
I'll second that.
You mean you don't want to spend another hour here?
No, I've got to go introduce the bill. I mean, I'd be happy to spend another hour.
No.
but,
Is that a second, Senator Abbas?
Oh, second.
Second, all those in favor of exiting executive session?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're out of executive session and the end of the public hearing is done, so.
All right.
Okay,
Beautiful.
thanks for coming.